I'm Kim Inslee, and thank you for joining us for Navigating Life Transitions, a podcast where we bring together advisors experienced in financial life planning to talk about ways to navigate life's biggest changes, challenges, opportunities, and decisions. So today, we are talking about considerations that come with a diagnosis of dementia. Now, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates 6.9 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with dementia. That's 1 in 9 people, and again, we're talking about age 65. So what do we need to know in the event that we or a loved one is diagnosed with dementia? Joining me today is Elise Houston, the Director of Advisory Services and a Senior Advisor at JNBA Financial Advisors, and also Jane Claremont, who's a nationally recognized consultant and an expert for those living with Alzheimer's and other related dementias. So good to see you both with us. I'm gonna start right at the beginning with you, Jane, and that is how to understand this diagnosis of dementia. So kind of how do our brains change as we age? What is dementia? I know it's an umbrella term. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So part of the recognition that you said already, at 65 years old, 1 in 9 people is going to get an actual diagnosis. And as you age that person to 75, that number is going to increase to about 25%. What's interesting at 85 years old, we're somewhere in about 1 in 3, 1 in 2 are actually going to receive a diagnosis. What's important also is when you talk about the kind of the umbrella, and when you think about knowing that getting the right diagnosis is important because the neurologist is going to be able to really help distinguish when they look at the brain. And that, to me, is important because if you know what type of dementia you're dealing with, just like cancer, then you're able to kind of put the right treatment plan in place.
It's all a little bit different.
Very much.
So we do a preliminary call to kind of circle up on these thoughts. But when you mention the different stages of dementia or different types, most people think of Alzheimer's, but there's really a wide spectrum.
There is. And when I first started, we used to call it hardening of the arteries. And then later on, it became using the umbrella term of dementia. That's the right thing. It's the umbrella, but there's more than 80 types of dementia, but there's 5 common types. Alzheimer's is the most prevalent, and it's going to affect somewhere about 80% of all the diagnosis will be of the Alzheimer's type. But we also have other dementias like Lewy body, which Robin Williams ended up with Lewy body. Frontal temporal, Bruce Willis was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia. We have vascular, which is stroke, and Parkinson's is also a type of dementia. So the recognition back to diagnosis will help really from a clinical standpoint, but can help family members. Mm-hmm. And when you learn more about each type of dementia, you're going to really look at what are the best approaches when you understand.
Okay. And I know, Elise, because you work long-term with clients, it could be decades in some cases. So you, a lot of times, might see something that other people don't, especially if you're seeing someone every few months.
Yeah.
You might notice changes that a spouse doesn't necessarily quite see yet because it's a slower progression.
Yeah, completely. We're sitting in a unique seat where we may have known this person through their younger working years, and as they've aged, we've seen some of their health potentially decline. Or, to your point, sometimes we don't see people in person. Maybe, a lot of us are meeting now, a phone or Zoom too, and then you meet with someone in person, and you think to yourself, either from a physical standpoint or even from that just kind of cognitive ability, quite a decline, and it might change how we ask questions. Just to validate and clarify again, we all, as you even mentioned, the fact that more and more of us are diagnosed with some form of dementia as we age, just as you age, the likelihood of seeing cognitive decline increases. So it's not always alarming, but it does allow us to just reframe and revalidate that the right, estate documents and planning are in place, just if that does tend to come to a point in time where other family members want to step in, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But really being in constant contact with your clients, it might raise some alarm bells to say, hey, let's get some FaceTime with them. Let's ask some questions and really say, how are you feeling? How is your health? That's often a question we like to ask.
And there's a good reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to back up a little bit, Jane, because you mentioned something really important, to get a qualified diagnosis. So a lot of people, they see their primary once a year, get their physical, and they figure that's it. If you suspect something, or if a family member suspects something, what are the steps to get to that person who's going to be the right person to make the diagnosis?
My hope is the primary recognizes that they are not the expert of the brain. And it's the primary doctor's responsibility to do a handoff for the family to find the right neurologist. Interesting, I was just with the family this morning, and the wife said, I don't know if we got the right neurologist the first time, but we did the second. And I said, there is a difference between competency of neurology. So it's getting to the right neurologist. And the other question that this wife asked me today, she said, do you think we should do further imaging? And I said, if you like to measure, then yes, because we may see some changes from 2 years ago. So it's getting to that right team approach of the neurology, their nursing staff, and we'll talk about other resources. So to really be a great guide and set people off on that, I call it the well-being model, on the right pathway.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I find too, kind of sitting in our unique seat, getting a correct diagnosis is also sometimes gives family members permission, if they have a clarity too on what is the care plan, what is the trajectory of this illness, kind of what timeframes are we talking about. Mm-hmm. It almost gives them permission to help advocate or take action, not just from a health standpoint, but from their overall well-being, which includes their finances. We will hear from the spouse, partner, or family members around this individual oftentimes, when's the right time to step in? Be it, when should I actually start monitoring mom and dad's bank accounts? When should I actually start sitting in on doctor's appointments, wanting to be respectful of their independence, their desires, their privacy too, but also knowing at some point there's probably that tipping point of when to be a true advocate for them. You need to be more involved.
And to get those things in place early, so it's
exactly.
not, because there is a too late part. And the other thing, there are all kinds of emotions around this. And for the person who's receiving the diagnosis, Jane, emotions around that as well. So if you could speak to that a little bit, and then finding that support group that's going to help you through that.
I think what's most important, what you just said, is recognition of each individual. And we all come to information differently. And when diagnosis is going to happen, you have to sometimes look at the individual. Is this going to be a diagnosis that they're going to accept? Is it going to be something that they don't understand now because maybe it's a little bit further down in progression? And that comes back to having trusted people in the circle to determine what does it look like and what would that in terms of telling them. I've seen where people have gone really into a significant depression just by the diagnosis, and to be able to couch it maybe differently and to be able to say, I've got memory issues, meaning we both do, so that we're alike and similar versus you're different because now you have a diagnosis. Then the next step would be, in terms of for information, is what are we going to look at for great resources that are going to support that person living with, but also family.
Mm-hmm. And then the financial piece of this, because it does bring about some financial concerns, not only treating it, but how to handle the finances of the person, the family, the spouse, the husband, the mom, the dad who are going through this.
Yeah, I would say, sometimes we'll meet with clients who think, we don't need to tell you that. There's nothing you can do with it. But as we've kind of talked about through all these podcasts, everything that you go through in life does end up having some sort of a financial tether or implication. And even if it doesn't directly, we oftentimes know of a lot of other wonderful resources like Jane and others who can be there for our clients, but specifically from that financial component, looking at what insurance policies do you have in place? If this was an early onset diagnosis of dementia and you were still a working person, what does that maybe mean for a change to your retirement timeline? What does, maybe you have disability insurance that you've been paying for yourself or through work, that now this dementia diagnosis allows you to file a claim. Maybe it is later in life and you want to understand that long-term care insurance policy I've been paying for all these years. When do I get to start to use that? There's a lot of ways that you can prepare for making sure you have the right financial support for this change, but also talking through how does this change your goals and timeline? I mean, for a lot of couples, and you started to mention it, the person who received the diagnosis has to navigate the emotions of that, but all the people around that person have to navigate the emotions they have with that as well. Right. There's likely a lot of fear, confusion. People are waiting to see. They're wanting to be respectful, not overstep, but they're navigating a huge change themselves. This person that was instrumental in their future, now they could potentially be changing. Maybe their life expectancy has changed. There's a lot that they are navigating. So revalidating what are the priorities. Common question we get from the person with the diagnosis is, are my loved ones going to be okay financially after this? I don't want to deplete our resources. So again, meeting with your team, we've covered this in a lot of our other podcasts as well, but just understanding, and there's a lot of depth to each of those nuanced opportunities financially to make sure that you have prepared for yourself, but also your family and loved ones through this transition.
And there are some really great podcasts on long-term care insurance, understanding, Medicare, Medicaid, that whole thing. I mean, it is super complicated.
It is. Yeah. And then also understanding the role of, when do you have that power of attorney or those loved ones start to step in and be more active in your financial matters? All of that. There's a lot of nuances there too, which I know we have some great resources on that you can listen to as well.
I want to get into the support thing in just a moment, Jane, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm recalling that we had a conversation in which you said there are some times where maybe you don't tell the person who has the diagnosis. Why would that be?
Well, mental health would be a huge part of this, and how that individual had lived with their normal brain versus now it's impaired by having some type of dementia. And in one particular situation I shared, it really wasn't the right decision to give that information to the individual, because the loss of self that came from that kind of label of you have Alzheimer's really set that person on a much deeper depression than what they had lived with in life. And so sometimes just couching it differently, Kim, makes all the difference. And going back to what I said about just validating and saying, you know what, I've got memory challenges sometimes when I don't sleep well and whatnot. It starts to give permission, and it's okay. Yeah. And then it's always trying to move beyond diagnosis to what is life with a well-being life. What does it look like? What can it look like? I was with the family today, and this individual is brilliant, but this individual is spending too much time sitting in a chair by themselves, sleeping, head down, and an overwhelmed caregiver, a caregiver there is a long-term care policy, and for 2 years has not activated it.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, let's get it out and let's start working on, because there's probably a 90-day rescission, period. And she said, it is. I said, let's get it out. And it's an unlimited policy, which how many have unlimited policies? There's not many. And it was an old policy.
Did she feel obligated, I should be doing this for my loved one? Or was it, I don't want to run out of?
It's a great question. I think it was more of overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed, has started to bring some support mechanisms of people in, but it's not set up and coordinated professionally. Once you start to, I call it synthesize the plan, coordinated, then all of a sudden you start to get a great rhythm. And that's what the goal is for everyone to live this best life with their best rhythm in life.
This reminds me, so early on in my career, and the story that I was working on was when assisted suicide was first being legitimized, I guess, in this country. And there was a woman in the market that I was in at the time, and she was one of the first people to utilize this. And she was a younger woman in her 50s who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so her decision was to get out. She chose that path. And at that time, there was no support system. And and she didn't have huge symptoms at the time either. So I'm wondering if there is a strong support system that can help people understand that there is a life to be led. There is hope there. So let's talk a little bit about support, not just from families, caregivers, and also for people who are alone in life. They may not have children. They may not have a spouse.
Well, I think knowledge is everything in terms of education. So I think having trusted information to draw from for that individual themselves living with, having co-support with other people that have a diagnosis as well. I was sharing with you this rich resource, and it's in Fargo, North Dakota, and it's called the Memory Cafe of the Red River Valley. This is a group of humans living with dementia diagnosis and their loved ones that are on fire. They are being educated. They are having wonderful, purposeful opportunities to do things. I mean, really rich opportunities. And so it's being able to reach out into the community and have help maybe with resource gathering to find the right place. I was sharing with this lovely woman this morning about the North Dakota chapter, and she goes, "Well, we can go there." And I said, "Oh, I don't want you going in January when it's really cold in Fargo." But I said, being able to go see a model like that, and then it's being able to kind of put this team together right back here. Mayo Clinic has been a rich resource in the dementia space. I mean, President Reagan was diagnosed there 31 years ago. There's resources through Health Partners, through the Alzheimer's Association. I think that's how I first met you, Kim, was during my time working with the Alzheimer's. We just have to take the time and create, I call it the milieu, the French word for what circles you in your environment to move forward.
Right. And then, Elise, you mentioning that you may already have resources that you don't realize you have access to, and you will help clients take a look at that through their insurance policies and whatnot. And getting help for the caregiver, I know, is hugely important.
Yeah, certainly. And even make just your team of professionals in general. There's a lot of reason why you want to make sure you're working with a team of professionals. We are really big advocates on bringing everybody to the table along the way through life's journey. But this is a moment too where lean into the strengths of that team that you've built. You have these insurance professionals, your financial advisor, your estate attorneys, your tax planning professionals, all of which we can help you to really think through what are those next steps that you should take to make sure that you are well cared for, protected, in a position of strength from the financial perspective, so that you can really focus on support groups, coming to terms with the diagnosis, really validating what is most important to not only myself but my family, given this change in our family makeup and dynamic now. I mean, it is a bit of a change. But I do think, too, I work with clients who, at the beginning, there is some shock at times. There maybe is a little bit of just grief over who they have been and worried about, am I going to lose myself in this? Am I going to lose my spouse? But, in this, and how do we maintain as much of us or as much as of me through this process? But there's also a lot of opportunity in there too. I mean, I've worked with a couple of clients who they loved work. They loved working, so they didn't ever officially retire because it brought them so much joy. Well, with this diagnosis, they decided, okay, I'm going to officially retire just based on kind of reprioritization of things. And they were able to spend the next handful of years checking every trip off the bucket list, spending all the time they could with kids and grandkids, really what is most important. It's a great kind of check along the way of saying, am I spending my time the way I really want to? And okay, let's revisit what's important. And maybe, we've planned and let's take advantage of the insurance policies we have in place. Let's make sure that we have all the appropriate estate planning documents at our fingertips and ready to go. And, we've worked with our financial advisor to know from a cash flow perspective, we can do this. And let's enjoy the time together.
Yeah, take the burden off of trying to figure out or thinking you can't do it, because sometimes you can do a lot more than you think.
Right.
As we wrap up, Jane, any thoughts you want to leave people with?
I think at least what I was listening to, and it was so special about the family, but there are individuals that don't have family. And today when I was visiting with a couple, we talked about the give back in life sometimes, and maybe now you can go and volunteer and you're able to do some things. And I mentioned, when I came into JNBA today, there's piles of coats for the coat drive. And I have flyers that I keep in my car because I'm on the board of the Salvation Army. There's so much that still is so rich in life. What do you want to do? So it's being able to match up maybe some value added opportunities beyond just maybe travel, beyond just family, that gives you that sense of myself. I'm giving back to others. Then you feel so enriched.
You are valued. Yeah.
You are valued.
Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. It's a good conversation. And I want to thank you for listening as well. And we hope that you will listen to all of the other JNBA Navigating Life Transitions podcasts. We've mentioned a few of them, a lot of resources available there. You can see the full list online at jnba.com. There's an Insights tab to get to the podcast page. And if you want to learn more about how JNBA can help you with your financial life goals, transitions, etc., planning, call them at 952-844-0995. Or you can use the contact form on jnba.com, and you can schedule a complimentary, no-obligation call with their experienced and multi-generational team. So thank you again for listening. I'm Kim Inslee, and I look forward to navigating more life transitions with you on our next podcast. We'll see you then. The previous presentation by JNBA Financial Advisors, LLC, henceforth JNBA, was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the podcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from JNBA or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risks, and it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy or any non-investment related or planning services, discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. Neither JNBA's investment advisor registration status nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of result or satisfaction will be achieved if JNBA is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Neither JNBA's investment advisor registration status nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of results or satisfaction will be achieved if JNBA is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. JNBA is neither a law firm nor accounting firm, and no portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. JNBA is not an insurance agent, and no portion of the above should be construed as insurance advice. All insurance issues should be addressed with the insurance professional of your choosing. JNBA nor its employees sell insurance products. JNBA is not an agent of the Social Security Administration. All claiming strategies and benefits must be verified and accepted by the Social Security Administration. JNBA is not an agent of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. All claiming strategies and benefits must be verified and accepted by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. JNBA is neither an agent of Administration on Aging nor an agent of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. JNBA is neither an agent of the IRS nor an agent of the U.S. Department of Treasury. No portion of the podcast or video podcast content should be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if JNBA is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Please remember, if you are a JNBA client, Please contact JNBA in writing if there are any changes in your personal or financial situation or investment objectives for the purpose of reviewing, evaluating, and/or revising our previous recommendations and/or services, or if you would like to impose, add, or to modify any reasonable restrictions to our investment advisory services. Unless and until you notify us in writing to the contrary, we shall continue to provide services as we do currently. All services provided by Kim Inslee are separate and independent of JNBA Financial Advisors, LLC. All services provided by other guests on the podcast are independent of JNBA Financial Advisors, LLC. JNBA providing a professional referral could present a conflict of interest because the professional may on occasion make a referral to JNBA, which could result in an economic benefit despite the lack of any revenue sharing or agreement in place. You are not obligated to engage the services of any such JNBA recommended professional, and the firm's Chief Compliance Officer, Kimberly M. Brown, remains available to answer any questions that you may have. JNBA is a registered trademark of JNBA Financial Advisors, LLC. A copy of JNBA's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at jnba.com.